We have to be vulnerable. We have to access the emotion inside of us to push the logic and the intuition forward. All of those things work together.
In this episode of Conversations Beyond the Brand, Tashana Thompson sits down with Susan Honea, a leadership mentor and coach helping overwhelmed and high-achieving leaders build clarity, confidence, and purpose through sustainable personal growth.
A mentor of mine says we think in three ways: head, heart, and gut. And when those three things are out of alignment, the decision or the path is not set. We can't fundamentally make the right decision at that point because something is telling us, either head, heart, or gut, that there's something else to explore here. And that involves that shadow work, that dark side work.
Emphasizing this alignment between the head, heart, and gut. How do you help leaders to start to listen to themselves again?
So one of the things that I do in coaching conversations is when I see an emotional reaction, so you'll see it sort of flutter across a person's face or the body language changes or whatever, right? When I see that happen, I say, what are you feeling in your body right now? And I kind of force the issue a little bit, gently, of course. Once we start paying attention to the signals that have been there all along, we become really aware of the signals and we notice them more quickly.
What have you found have been some of the signs of burnout that people most ignore? Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Conversations Beyond the Brand. I'm your host, Tashana Thompson. I'm super excited for today's episode. Many of you are like me and have went through a season in your leadership journey when you've been incredibly overwhelmed. The title looks impressive on paper, but everything around you feels heavy. And today, we have the coach that's going to solve all of the world's problems now. But a lot of them, some great tips are going to come from my guest today, Susan Honea. I'm so excited to have you and have this conversation.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here. And that's a big lofty intro, that I'm going to solve all the world's problems.
I think that you're going to teach us some great tips on how to reframe some things and become better leaders. I have faith.
Yeah.
So before we jump in, will you tell the audience a little bit about who you are and what you bring to the world?
Yeah, of course. I'm Susan Honea, as Tashana said, and I'm in my fourth professional chapter. I started out in healthcare and learned that was not where I needed to be long-term. And so I switched after finishing my undergrad work in English and was a technical writer and went into corporate training for a number of years. I learned a lot about myself in those corporate training days, and that surprised me in that, we're in this corporate environment and we're learning about ourselves. And this was at a time too, when we didn't put a lot of emphasis on self-development and things like that. And I reached a point of burnout and I decided that I needed a big change. So I went into academics for about 13 years. And I loved the freedom of that, being able to go and do and just be there with my daughter and things like that. And the academic world changed in the late 2000 teens. And I landed a little consultancy that offered coaching and professional development services. And all of a sudden, everything clicked. And I realized that all these things I had done up to that point were leading me to where I ultimately needed to be. And yeah, I needed to experience all that other stuff first, but it all got me where I needed to be.
I love that.
Yeah. So now I offer leadership development, strengths-based coaching, and both one-on-one and group type events. I do small business consulting, nonprofit consulting within that same sort of realm. So that's the nutshell version of what I'm offering now.
Gotcha. So how did you discover, you talked about your journey, but I want to go in a little bit more depth into how you decided from leaving academics to going into consultancy, that coaching and leadership coaching was going to be where you put your stamp on things.
Yeah, it's a great question. The bottom line is I got a coach and I thought, this changes everything. And I'm looking around at myself. I'm looking around at my broader environment and I'm thinking, why didn't I do this in my 20s? And then I thought, oh, wait, I know that age group really well. And the founder of the company I was working with at the time, the consultancy I was with at the time, came to me and said, I have a coaching client for you. And I honestly, at first, I thought she was crazy. I didn't see myself as a coach, which is a whole different story. But imposter syndrome is real. I'm a product of that a lot of the time. But I agreed to take on that one client, and I loved it. It was all about problem solving and asking questions and diving deep and having conversations, kind of like this, actually, where we talked about the things, whatever the things were, and we explored areas that needed to be uncovered and needed to be unpacked. Then I went and got a master's degree in positive psychology, and I learned a whole different way of thinking about who we are, how we show up in the workforce, at home, in our volunteer activities and other civic and maybe spiritual work that we do, all of those kinds of things. And so for the past several years, I've applied that in my practice to help people become the best versions of themselves. So
I love that. I love that. So we've seen a lot change in our world in terms of um, how much of self-development and professional development come into the workplace. Because there was a time, like you spoke of, that we weren't as concerned with these things. And then we were really concerned with it. And now it seems like we're making a bit of a shift to not being as concerned about it anymore.
mm.
What has been your experience during this transition?
You're right about how it's transpired. We had a lot of emphasis on team development in particular. Team building was the big buzzword in the late 90s and early 2000s. And let's go bowling and let's go do the thing and let's do the trust fall and so on and so forth. And we spent a lot of time building curriculum around that and around helping people learn to communicate and collaborate effectively, which was great. But we were missing the real issue, which is that even though we can talk to one another, if we're not aware of who we are, we sort of selling ourselves short. So then we shifted into the big right turn, if you will, into self-development only. And we kind of threw the team development out with that shift. And self-development, and honestly, I have to thank the generation right behind me. I'm a Gen Xer. I'm a proud Gen Xer, but the millennials really made it normal made it normal for us to say, "Hey, I need help with this. I need to have someone hold space for me to explore or whatever, or fix a problem, or just serve as a guide, or even mentoring." Because I sort of lump it all together. We have training, we have mentoring, we have consulting, and we have coaching, and they're kind of all on the same continuum.
Right.
And so we spent a lot of that one-on-one focus there with the coaching piece and the self-development piece for many, many years. And now we're shifting back into a blend. So we're seeing more of the collaborative team development coming back into play, and still supported by and anchored by that individual work that impacts the team's success and to some extent a greater degree.
Mhm.
And I'm encouraged by that shift. We have some challenges that we're navigating, what with some of the changes in the workforce that we're seeing right now. A lot of the bigger companies are restructuring, they're rethinking how they do all of this, which means then budgets are changing, decision points are changing, and all those kinds of things. But I think even in a small business, even in a micro business that's under six figures, there's an opportunity to do both team and one-on-one development and create contexts in which those businesses can scale more easily, can be more profitable more quickly, and all of those kinds of things.
And this is so true. And the coaching that you're providing, I was just having another podcast interview this morning. We're talking all about scaling. And a lot of this, the trouble that we have with scaling happens at a leadership level.
Mhm.
And I am a firm believer, and I say all the time that our businesses only grow as quickly as we do as individuals. So I am a tremendous advocate of coaching. I've spent way too much money on coaching.
Haven't we all?
Money well spent, though.
Yeah.
Like, my business wouldn't have grown if I had not done the things and invested in that way. What experience or turning point do you think it was for you when you realized that, okay, there's a lot of things that you can coach your clients on tactically,
Mhm.
but what does the emotional capacity and in what point, however you want to talk about that, but there's so much that happens from an emotional capacity for leadership, especially.
That's true. I don't call myself a mindset coach per
Sure.
se, but we are whole people, right? So we can't just coach this one little part of the person. We have to look at the whole situation, work, home, anything else that's involved, factors prior to the coaching conversation, factors that will come after the coaching conversation, and so on. And so I think the piece that really clicked for me as far as the emotion was concerned was that they can't be separated. I read a book about, let's see, probably 4.5 years ago now, called The Upside of Your Dark Side. Hmm. It's not it's not for everybody. There's a little bit of heaviness to it, but it changed everything for me. And when I was really anchoring myself in positive psychology, it was the text that said, okay, we need to acknowledge that we have emotional baggage. We need to acknowledge that we cannot we can think of ourselves in parts. There's a whole name for that. Um, at the same time, we exist as a singular human being, an entity, if you will. And if we don't examine all of the parts of us, we're not serving ourselves. We're not giving ourselves the opportunity to show up at our best, to take care of others at our best, to even be the best partners and bosses and employees and so on and so forth. And so when I read that book and I thought, okay, the dark side, the shadow work, which is basic Jungian psychology, but the shadow work is in many ways where the magic happens. And once we start to uncover the things that are standing in our way, the saboteurs, if you're a positive intelligence person, or look at it in whatever term you assign to it, but those things that are dark in our lives, the duality of ourselves, we can begin to move forward toward the things that we want. And that was this just giant aha moment for me. And it was literally like the light bulb lit above my head. And there are rare moments in life when we get those opportunities to have those kinds of epiphanies. It was a big one. And I have reread that book twice since then because it's that important for us to focus on these things that we don't want to necessarily talk about. We have to go there. We have to be vulnerable. We have to access the emotion inside of us to push the logic and the intuition forward, and all of those things work together. A mentor of mine says we think in three ways: head, heart, and gut. And when those three things are out of alignment, the decision or the path is not set. We can't fundamentally make the right decision at that point because something is telling us, either head, heart, or gut, that there's something else to explore here. And that involves that shadow work, that dark side work.
Mm, that is so good, Susan. I want to explore that a bit more because, in my nearly 20 years of business ownership, I've worked with so many women, so many people. And this is the piece that nobody wants to look at.
Mhm.
The piece that people think, oh, it's so woo woo. I don't need to do that. I'm a woo woo. I'm a woo woo queen. Okay. So, but I'm just playing angel's advocate for a moment. They don't see the correlation between having a successful business, being a successful leader, and doing this deep work. I do immediately, right? So, what do you say to that? Someone that just doesn't see it.
The first question I'm going to ask is, what do you see? I want to understand what their their view, their perception of reality is, because that's their reality at that moment. And you know, how do I say this? Not everybody is a great candidate for coaching. People who are closed off to the idea of being vulnerable and doing the deep work aren't going to move the needle in the way that somebody is who's willing to go all in right out of the gate. It's, can I ultimately convince somebody to go to that darker side, to be more vulnerable? Maybe. Do I really want to do that? I don't think so. And I think when people recognize that they're not ready, that's self-awareness, right? When we recognize that we're not ready for that particular step, we can take a step back, re-examine where we are, and figure out, is this the right way for me to go, or do I need to look for another alternative here? Do I need to look at a solution where maybe I hire a mentor instead of a coach, and the mentor tells me how to do things, or I hire a consultant to just come in and do it for me? Whereas the coach is going to be persistent and act as a guide and ask the hard questions and kind of force that vulnerability element. And when we hit a brick wall, and when I do in particular, when I hit a brick wall as a coach, I'm like, I'm out. I don't want to go any further. You're not fun anymore. And it's not that I don't want to work with the person, but I can't really help that person if they don't go there. They have to be willing to give me all of themselves in order to get what they want out of whatever their core goal is.
Because there's so many people who think they're vulnerable, or who, in my work too, I'm asking for the same thing, right? I'm asking for the exact same thing. There's a certain level of vulnerability that you need to have in order to brand and market yourself effectively. You kind of, if you're a solopreneur or have a small business and you're the figurehead, you kind of got to be okay with sharing something, not everything, but something about yourself, so that people can feel connected to you. I think that, I don't know. I think sometimes people tell themselves, well, I don't have to do all that to be in business.
Yeah.
And it's true. But I would have flipped this on its head. So we've talked about, okay, if you're not ready, you're not ready. You're my kind of people. I kind of have the same methodology. I don't want to force feed. I don't want to bang you over the head and
Mhm.
argue with you about eating your vegetables. Like, I don't want to do it, right?
And ultimately, I don't want people to waste their time and money, right? I want them to
Absolutely.
feel like that the investment that they're making, and I would say this is true of most people in our space, is we don't want people to feel like they didn't get out of it what they really wanted or
Absolutely.
needed. And so I've said that to people. I've been very direct and said, I don't think you're ready for this, or I think you need a different kind of coach than who I am.
Absolutely. And it's beautiful you know, to be honest in that way. And I've done the
Mhm.
same thing. And yeah, everybody's not a fit. But on the flip side, when you have someone come to you and they're really ready to do the deep work
Yeah.
and they're really ready to look at this dark side, what have you found that it opens up for them in their businesses?
The short answer there is anything they want. If I'll use a specific example here. One of my favorite clients of all time is a woman who was in a role, not an entrepreneur. She was in a corporate role and came to me for coaching in a finance accounting type role, and she was really struggling in that role. She felt misaligned with the role. She felt like she she was being asked to do things that she could fundamentally do, but her team wasn't supportive, and that was up, down, and sideways, by the way. She felt like, from a 360-degree perspective, that she was just fish out of water in many ways. And I said to her, early in our conversations, we worked together for a little over a year. The first conversation I had with her, I said, tell me about your life outside of work.
Mm.
And she told me about her losses, multiple. She
Wow.
told me about her struggles. She told me about all the things. This is what I meant when I was talking about, whole person coaching before. She opened up about all these other things, and ultimately I got to the big question, which for her was, how's all that affecting how you show up at work? And it was her light bulb moment. And we started working on how she self-regulates and those kinds of things when she's in situations that make her uncomfortable. I'm a Gallup strengths coach, and her strengths profile told me very clearly that she likes things a certain way, kind of
Mhm.
deliberate layout of tasks, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and here are my parameters, and I like to live within those and those kinds of things. And I said, so, you fundamentally show up this way at home because you're in control. But when you're not in control, when you're at work, how do you communicate these needs to people? How do you say these things to people? And ultimately, through a series of several months of conversations, she got not one, not two, but three promotions with raises at each one.
Oh, wow.
Uh-huh. Over the course of 15 months. Mhm. She went from feeling like she was absolutely misaligned with the work she was doing, the team she was leading, the people she was working for and with, to being in a role where she feels trusted and valued and part of the team. I was talking with somebody earlier today, a potential client, who revealed to me that the one thing she's missing is that sense of camaraderie, that team element, working with other people. She's been an entrepreneur since just before the pandemic began, and she's really missing that connectedness that comes from being in an office. And these are the kinds of awareness elements that we can get to very quickly that help people understand what doors will open for them as they begin to understand these elements. So, I think about the woman from this morning. I think about how she's asking for that sense of community, how she's asking for more meaningful work in maybe nonprofit or similar kinds of spaces, because that's important to her. That's close to her heart. And I said, all right, what would it look like to pursue A, B, or C? Pick a path and tell me what that would feel like. And so it began the exploration for her to see that she's not constrained to being a solopreneur for the rest of her life. She's in a space where she could do some agency work, she could do some consulting, she could do some referral networking, all those kinds of things. And ultimately make it really better for her. But because she was so mired in it, she couldn't see it. And that's what coaching does. That's what really revealing all of yourself does, is it opens these opportunities for you to see, for the individual to see.
That's so good.
Mhm.
And that really in that scene, it really helps us to determine what our emotional capacity is too, right?
Yeah, because we also have to be willing to say, I do not want to do that. And here are my parameters. Here are my non-negotiable yeses and my non-negotiable nos. And one of the things I really love working with people on is, okay, what are your non-negotiable nos? What are the things you will not do and why?
And I think that that's really hard for so many women. And you and I both work with a lot of women. Um, and I don't, and I'll just speak for myself. I don't know that I was ever taught like true boundaries, the true what are my no's,
Mm,
and you bringing that. So that's something I'm learning as an adult. And my mom, she didn't learn it. She's learning it now too, right? We're all learning together. But you're bringing it into your work. So when a client texts you at midnight, or like all of these things that 5, 10 years ago were not boundaries that I had, really impact the work and how you feel about the work,
mhm.
um, and how you feel about yourself. And you spoke earlier about this imposter syndrome that many of us battle. I think being able to have a coach that helps you navigate all of those things is just so important. One of the other things I want to talk to you about is this pressure that many leaders, and it sounds like your former client may have felt this too, this pressure that we feel to be everything to everyone.
Mm.
What have you found helps people, especially women, reclaim their sense of personal agency
Yeah.
in those situations?
And you mentioned a moment ago this notion of learning to set and enforce and reinforce boundaries. Um, what I use this example with my clients a lot. When I was growing up, I was taught that saying no to someone who was in a position of authority of any kind was a sign of failure
Yep.
and disrespect in a lot of ways. And so, like you, it took me until I was substantially into my career before I realized that I was saying yes to everything, even though I wasn't the right person and those things weren't right for me. And so I use myself in a lot of those lessons that I work with my clients on. And I tell them, I'm honest about the experiences that I've had where I've struggled, where I've said yes to something and it's backfired colossally in a couple of cases. And I talk about how hard it was for me to recognize that saying no is actually a good thing. It's a good thing in many ways, and being discerning about the work that we take on as women in particular allows us to put our focus where our focus needs to be. We're pulled in many directions anyway. Typically, as women, we may have life partners, we may have children, some of us may have parents we're taking care of or assisting in some way. We may have grandchildren. A lot of my peers are heading into that part of their lives now, and that's just the personal side, and that doesn't even count if we have a spiritual organization we're part of, or a volunteer sort of thing that we do, or other friends and whatnot. And so we're not even at the work part yet. And we've said yes to all these things. So we have to, and there are kind of two parts to this. The first is we have to get comfortable being true to who we are as people. What does that mean? So each of us is an individual. Somebody else may have a much greater capacity than I do, or vice versa. And we have to understand what our capacities actually are, the things that drive us, the things that make us want to jump out of bed in the morning and get to whatever it is, whether it's work or home or whatever. The second piece of it is that we have to learn that it is absolutely 100% acceptable to ask for help in
Ooh.
making some of these decisions. Seeking wise counsel, using somebody else in a conversation like this just to spitball possibilities or do a full pro con analysis or a SWOT analysis even, can enlighten things that we don't pay attention to, because an outside person, somebody who's completely objective to the situation, is going to call out things that we're choosing not to see, or that we've shoved under the rug intentionally or whatever.
Mhm.
And so, I say we have to get comfortable saying no. We have to get comfortable asking for help. We have to get comfortable taking time off. There's a whole philosophy out there now. There's a method that Dan Sullivan talks a lot about in his strategic coach method, about having dedicated time where there is no work.
Yeah.
The end, no exceptions.
Yeah.
And the women I work with, that's their biggest struggle. They're corporate, they're business owners. They bring that work home, or they work from home. And so there's no boundary around it. There's nothing like that. And so we have to have some really difficult conversations around, you don't get to work on Saturday and Sunday this week. And I'm going to hold you accountable to that.
You've said so much that resonates with me. I was just thinking yesterday, um, I was preparing to make meals before going into meetings, and I was just thinking to myself, all these roles.
Mhm.
Like in our house, we're doing Daniel fast, and who does all the preparation fall to?
Mom.
So it's like, and I haven't even got to work yet.
Yeah.
And this is not unique to me. This is so many leaders coming into spaces,
Hmm.
not taking the time off. I'll just add this small caveat. I used to have a COO, hey Shay Cannon, who tried and failed to have me work 3 weeks of the month and take the final week off.
Mm.
And that didn't work because it's like so hard for us to walk away. But what I found in like being off for the holidays and things is that I was just firing all cylinders in terms of creativity and being able to think and not having a meeting and like all these things that burn us out, that we don't create space and we think we can't take off because we're busy business owners or we're busy leaders and the team needs us and this person needs us. And then we find ourselves in spaces where we are ignoring all these warning signs to burnout. I don't
Mm.
know where I heard it, probably YouTube or Instagram, but I saw a video last week of a therapist who works in a psych facility.
Mm.
And she was saying that, I have business owners and CPAs and analysts here who did not realize how far gone they were in terms of caring for themselves.
Mm.
And how many of us, it really resonated with me so much, how many of us are just one instance from not being ourselves.
Yeah.
And she gave the example of this analyst who hadn't had a day off in years.
Mm.
And he was repeating over and over again in the psych ward now, I'm so tired. I'm so tired. And that's all he had. Because at some point, we shut down.
Hmm.
If
Yeah.
we don't take care of ourselves, if we don't face these things, if we don't get the support we need, if we don't ask for help, we shut down.
Hmm.
What have you found have been some of the signs of burnout that people most ignore?
Well, the one you said, I'm so tired and not ever, you could sleep 9, 10 hours a night and still be tired. And that's a huge red flag. Um, I would say that weight gain is one. Um, it's usually an indicator of spending too much time at the desk or doing the thing and then retreating to the couch and not doing
Yeah.
anything else. Withdrawal from family and friends. So hiding out, becoming a little bit of a hermit. There are multiple stages of burnout, obviously, but these are all potential symptoms. Headaches, physical sorts of symptoms like neck and shoulder pain occasionally from sitting too much. I invested in a standing desk for that reason, and you notice there's a chair right in front of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm at a sitting
Uh,
desk too, by the way. Sitting at my sitting desk too. No judgment.
Yeah, no judgment, no judgment at all. I was considering getting a walking pad for it, and I still haven't done it. Um, I would also argue that procrastination is the thing that is usually the biggest, hey, check me out kind of red flag, because there's a reason that we're putting something off or putting all the things off. Um, when somebody comes to me, I had a client once, I'll use this specific example and I'm going to change some details to protect anonymity here.
Yes.
Um, this client came to me with about 6 months of mail like literally mail out of the mailbox. And she showed it to me. We were on Zoom and she showed it to me. And I said, what is all of that? And she said, it's unread mail. And I said, is it sorted? No. Well, what's in there? I don't know. And she was so burned out, she couldn't even open her own mail. The good news is she had most of her bills set up on auto pay, thankfully. But she was so burned out with her day-to-day existence that she was ignoring everything else. She wasn't cooking for herself. She was door dashing everything. Yeah, we can DoorDash every now and again. It's not a big deal. But if you're consistently taking those kinds of shortcuts because you don't have the personal wherewithal, the energy to go into the kitchen and heat up a can of soup, we've got a bigger issue. And so when I'm working with clients, I usually ask a series of questions that will help me drill down into that space and get a sense of, are we approaching burnout? Do we have a right person, wrong job role kind of misalignment? And sometimes these things can can lead us down that path instead. It doesn't have to be burnout. There can be other things going on. But I ask these questions to help me understand, all right, what are we really dealing with here? Who is this person? What have they piled up on their plate? And what are the symptoms telling us? So I do ask people about money habits, sleep, eating, and physical movement habits. It can feel a little invasive at first, and all of my clients have permission to refuse to answer a question that they're not comfortable answering.
Right.
I ask about spiritual practices and what they do for stress relief, because we don't talk about that. We don't say, hey, do you go to a gym? Do you take a walk? Do you walk your dog? All these kind of things. We don't normalize those kinds of discussions around self-care as it relates to burnout specifically. We're seeing a lot of work in stress science. There's some work going on at University of California, San Francisco right now, and in the greater Berkeley area that's focusing on stress and the long and short-term effects of stress and those kinds of challenges. That's not 100% my area of expertise, so I read the articles and I use the information, but it's been fascinating to watch how we've begun to have burnout and stress and cortisol and all of the things that go with it on our Instagram feeds, on our TikTok feeds, on our YouTube feeds, everywhere, because it's important. We need to be talking about this stuff. We need to be doing research around all of this. We need to support people through their individual journeys. We need to have people available who are experts in those areas. I met somebody the other day who's a personal chef for women in perimenopause. Who knew?
Okay, who knew?
Who knew? And she's fabulous. And I thought, I'm filing your card and I'm gonna refer you to a whole pile of people I can think of right off the top of my head, because we all need that, right? But just normalizing the discussion around burnout, I think, is really the first step, and being willing to admit that we are feeling the feelings that we are. We have shoved all of that under the rug for years. We showed up, I'm fine.
And so many people still do. I mean, I would argue that we're coming into a space, it seems like we're regressing in a lot of ways where, especially in corporate roles, nobody cares how you're doing. Perform. And I can say, as a business owner, to a certain extent, I love my clients and my clients love me, but I don't want to continuously come to them. Oh, nobody wants to do that.
Nope.
Right? You want to be reliable. You want to be trustworthy. You want to do the things that you said you're going to do. So if someone's listening to us and they say, oh my God, I'm a chronic procrastinator, what steps foundationally, if you're giving them a couple quick tips, could they take to really lead themselves out of that into a more peaceful and purposeful state?
What a fantastic question. First and foremost, I'm going to ask them to pick one thing to accomplish today. One, no more than one. Eventually I would coach them into a framework of, let's establish our 3 priorities for today, the 3 things that we need to get done today. We never set more than 3. We only do 3. You're going to hear me say 3 a lot in this particular little passage because it's 3. And that's about the max that we can handle in a given day. And if we get done with those 3 things early, then we can pick something off of the longer to-do list. But the first thing we're going to do is we're going to get one thing done. So with the client who came to me with 6 months of unread mail, I said, open the first envelope that's on the top and tell me what it says. Literally, that's all we did. One thing. And we can learn from experts in the field like Mel Robbins and others that in some ways ripping off the Band-Aid is good. So Mel Robbins' 5-second rule is something that I use with clients quite a lot. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go. I also will use Pomodoro method, or the tomato timer, as we sometimes refer to it. Any timer will do, obviously, but setting a timer and causing ourselves intentionally to work on the thing we're avoiding for a short period of time, might be 2 minutes to start with, but just getting something done often will show us that the thing we've been avoiding isn't that bad after all. I mean, if you think about what are the worst things that most of us have to deal with, we might get a letter from the IRS that could be really scary. We might get, my husband's an accountant, so I'm legally obliged to say those kinds of things. We might get we might need to schedule a medical procedure that scares us. We might need to have a difficult conversation with an employee. And because there's fear or uncertainty around it, we shove it aside and don't do it until we absolutely have to. And ultimately, things get worse when we do that.
For sure.
And so, the more we can encourage people to just do things, even in micro increments, the easier it will get for them. And methodologies like Eat the Frog and stuff like that do work. I tend to individualize those sorts of suggestions for clients based on what I know about them and who they are and what their strengths are, what their DISC profile looks like. I'm not a DISC person, but the profile is actually quite informative in this particular case, and really customize the prescription, if you will, for what they're going to do. But in general, just do the one thing, and then do one thing tomorrow, and then do one thing the next day. And then in the case of this week, that brings us to Saturday. And guess what? It's a day off.
Yeah. I think that's so hard, especially when, as a recovering procrastinator myself, especially if you feel like you're behind on things, or you have a to-do list that's 20 deep. And, you have, okay, what's the most urgent? Everything's urgent. But you're so right. The 3 things, everything can't be.
No. And sometimes this is where, we need to be willing and to ask for help, right? Sometimes it's beneficial to bring out the to-do list and say to a collaborative work partner, hey, can you spend 5 minutes with me and help me prioritize the top 3 things on this list, or the top 10 things on this list? And sometimes that involves clients. When we're working with clients and we've let stuff pile up and we have to say, hey, we got a lot going on here. Help me prioritize really quickly so that I can move the needle for you in a timely fashion. Because when we have a situation where the person and the client, so the person I'm coaching in this particular case and their client are both procrastinating, it compounds the issue. Yeah. And I've seen it happen. It happens fast, unfortunately. So I too am a recovering procrastinator. I've been a lot better in recent years because I understand what drives me there. One of the things I learned about myself about 5, 6, 7 years ago was that I need external accountability for all of that kind of stuff. So when I'm working on a big project, I have somebody else, not me, somebody else set all the deadlines. And then I'm accountable to that person. And it is never, ever my spouse.
Mm,
It is always somebody who can be in my face a little bit, direct, and not have it feel personal. So,
right.
and this particular person and I share this responsibility with one another. So she does this for me and I do it for her.
Nice.
And we've developed over the last few years a relationship where we lift each other up and get each other out of procrastination or funk or whatever it is that we're feeling in that particular moment or dealing with. And so we kind of it's kind of like a little miniature coaching circle. We coach each other and we help each other be accountable. It's great. Yeah, but I had to ask for help. I had to figure out that one of my issues is that if I set my timeline on my own, I'm just going to push the date out.
Oh, for sure. I'm I'm queen of a sliding thing if it's for me.
Even and especially on the electronic calendar, right? Oh, I can move that to
Absolutely.
next week.
Absolutely. I think this is going to resonate with so many people though, um, that are trying to hold it all.
Yeah.
When you commit to more than 3 things on a given day for months, weeks, months, years, guess what? You're behind.
Yep.
And then you're like fearful of the fact that you're behind and beating yourself up about it. But I think that you've really given us some good tips on how we can start to come out of that. And one thing that you talked about earlier was really emphasizing this alignment between the head, heart, and gut.
Mhm.
How do you help leaders to start to listen to themselves again?
You know, the hardest one of those 3 is the gut, the body. We feel it. We just don't want to acknowledge that we feel it. So one of the things that I do in coaching conversations is when I see an emotional reaction, so you'll see it sort of flutter across a person's face or the body language changes or whatever, right? When I see that happen, I say, "What are you feeling in your body right now?" And I kind of force the issue a little bit, gently, of course, but where do you feel that? I noticed this reaction. What does it feel like in your gut? What does it feel like in your shoulders? What does it feel like in your neck or in your toes? You know, did it make your toes curl because it was just so uncomfortable? Um, and once we start paying attention to the signals that have been there all along, we become really aware of the signals and we notice them more quickly. And one of the things that I work, particularly with young people, one of the things I work with them on is your parents may have told you, your teachers may have told you this. You are your own person and you need to feel what you are feeling. I know I said that earlier in the conversation, but I know when I was a kid, I was told to show up, be quiet, look nice,
Yep.
and don't feel anything. And so I learned that behavior, and we continue to perpetuate that with our younger folks these days. And so I work with them on what it feels like to have an emotional reaction that they can actually control
Mm,
or that they can respond to in a way that is productive and respectful. I work with them to understand what the connection is with what they're feeling in their gut at that same moment. Meaning, did I have butterflies in my stomach? Did my stomach hurt? Did my shoulders hurt? Did I get a headache? All of those kinds of things. And it's not a medical diagnosis, it's a bodily feeling. What did my body tell me in that moment that made me go, oh, yay, or oh, yeah.
yeah.
And we all know what those feelings feel like, but we don't acknowledge them a lot of the time. And once we get used to acknowledging them, they're part of who we are. So now I check in with myself. I do a check in when I'm making a decision. All right, what is my head telling me? What is my heart telling me? What is my gut telling me? And we work on that in the coaching context too of what would it look like for you in a meeting to do a quick, silent head, heart, gut kind of check in with yourself that nobody else is seeing before you move forward or before you say something.
That
So
is so good.
yeah, and I teach people this is a positive intelligence technique, but I teach people that when they're feeling stressed to rub their fingertips together and feel for the fingerprint ridges, and it immediately decreases stress. And you can do that under the desk and nobody can see it. So if somebody's feeling stressed and needs to just recenter without everybody else seeing them take a big deep breath, find those fingerprint ridges. It takes concentration. You can only really do one thing at once. Multitasking is a myth, and it will recenter that sort of thought pattern that you're having in that moment and give you the space to check in with your head, heart, and your gut quietly, and then move forward with whatever you need to do.
I love that. I could talk to you forever. There's so
Yeah,
many
this is so much fun.
questions that I have, but for the sake of respecting your time, I'll wrap up. We have to do this again sometime. But before you go, I'd love to have a little fun with you. So, what is your go-to coffee or tea order?
Well, I do typically a very large black tea iced, unsweetened.
Okay.
Yep.
What is the one book that you recommend to every leader?
Oh, Unreasonable Hospitality, without a doubt. It's the best book I've read in the last couple of years from a business perspective. I have a physical copy up on the bookshelf. It's right over here. And I have the Kindle version on my iPad, which I carry with me everywhere I go. I refer to that book all the time. Will Guidara lays out such a beautiful way of looking at building a successful business. And it all started from, I don't want to give the book away, but it all started from a point of this particular restaurant finishing 50th in the top 50 restaurants in the world.
Oh, wow.
And they were devastated. The owners and chefs and managers were devastated. And they set out to figure out what they could do differently that would change their ranking and ultimately get them to number one. And some of the things some of the things in the book are a little bit outlandish sounding, but when you think about the context and then you switch the context to a workplace or a small business or a friendship relationship and how you would translate that, it makes a lot of sense. So by far, and it was recommended to me actually. I had not heard of it, and the person said, "Hey, you need to read this book." She bought me a copy of it, handed it to me. I devoured it. I read it again.
Wow.
And yep, and it was fabulous. But that is my go-to, and I recommend it to everybody.
I have two from you now that I've written down that I will be getting today.
Yeah.
I think on that note, thank you so much.
Yeah,
Susan,
thank you.
it's such an amazing conversation. There's so many things that we talked about that I'd like to take that one thing to your point and blow it open. So many wonderful nuggets that you've shared. Thank you for sharing your wisdom and your heart today. If you want to know more about Susan and her work, I will have all of her information in the show notes. But until next time, stay rooted, stay connected, and stay in relationship. See you later. Bye.